Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion on the future of planning and development. My name's Aaliyah Pollock, and I work at RICS, also known as the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. For those of you who aren't aware, RICS sets global standards for the built and natural environments, with members working right across the property lifecycle from land and planning and development to construction and asset management and eventual end of use. This broad perspective gives us a unique insight into how technology is shaping all of the sectors involved with the built and natural environments. In my role here at RICS, I analyse the impacts of AI, data and technology, and a big part of that involves running the RICS Tech Partner Programme, which helps bridge the gap between the surveying profession and tech innovators. Through thought leadership content and collaboration, we explore how emerging technologies can support professionals in making better data-driven decisions. Today, we're going to look at how technology is shaping planning and development, the role of innovation in addressing housing challenges, and the importance of data in practices like urban planning, and also what the future of the planning system might look like. So without further ado, I'd like to go around the table and introduce our panelists. So Euan, would you mind going first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much for having me. My name is Euan Mills. I'm a planner and an urban designer and the co-founder of Blocktype. Blocktype is a platform that helps de-risk housing approvals. I have a background in architecture, and I have worked in the intersection between technology and planning for about 8-9 years now.
Great stuff. Klaas, do you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. My name is Klaas Bosma. I'm Chief Operational Officer at Planon Real Estate. We deliver software solutions for the planning and development phase, focusing on the financial feasibility part of creating and developing real estate.
Great. And Matthew?
Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Jensen. I'm Director of FraiserLine Architecture and Planning, and also New Age Geospatial. So two businesses. One is more of a multidisciplinary architectural traditional practice. We do a lot of self-build commercial work, automotive and leisure. And then New Age Geospatial is a surveying-based company using laser scanning, reality capture, and also latest technologies to manage the asset life cycle.
Thanks, Matthew. And last but not least, Simon.
Hi, thanks for having me, and welcome, or thank you for having me. Welcome to everyone else and myself. Simon Skoczek, co-founder of Boom, which we co-founded about 6 or 7 years ago, essentially as a networking platform between landowners and land users of whatever type that might be, developers, promoters, those trading in biodiversity net gain, community initiatives, and everything in between, and the connection of all of the primary stakeholders along that project lifecycle. So yeah, that's us.
Thank you very much to our panelists there for the introductions. So the first topic that I'd like to speak about is really the role of technology and how that's shaping the future of planning and development. As we're all aware, sitting on this call, technology is transforming the way that we plan and develop our cities, making processes faster, more efficient, and increasingly data-driven. From AI-powered analysis to digital twins, new innovations are helping planners and developers make more informed decisions. But as we've probably all experienced, with these new advancements come challenges such as adoption, integration, and the need for regulatory frameworks that keep up with the pace of change. So the first question that I'd just like to throw out there on the table is, how is technology currently being used in planning and development? Has anyone got any examples? And what do you see as the key technologies really driving this change?
Euan?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you can look at the whole development process, right? So how do developers find land for development? They write letters, not even emails. They write letters to landowners. How do architects and planning consultants submit planning applications? They turn all this really interesting data that they have into bake them into PDFs and send PDFs into this basically this mailbox, right? How do local authorities and assess planning applications? Well, they look through spreadsheets manually, measure drawings, do all that kind of stuff. And then if you think about the rules and regulations that they use to apply for planning permission, how is that written? It's an incredibly manual process. I'd say that the planning development world is still stuck in the 90s. It has evolved. We don't do mostly we don't submit paper planning applications anymore. There was a time that we moved that we submit boxes of planning applications. So we've moved from paper and boxes to PDFs and USB sticks. But the reality is the world and technology has now moved to a world of kind of data and APIs, and the planning development world hasn't quite caught up to that yet.
No, not at all, has it really? And I think that there is there are some acknowledgements clearly of that, and some new frameworks and people working with government to try and even just standardize that information so that it makes it a lot easier for applications to be submitted, but to truly understand very quickly and efficiently what are the standards and policies that are truly being applied in a particular area, and gaining access to that efficiently without difficulty. And at the present moment, it is really difficult. Even just finding settlement boundaries for LPAs is a monumental task. You would think you'd be able just to go into a local planning authority, click on a button. This is where we want to grow our population. These are the areas where we think it's best suited, and it's incredibly difficult. It's almost as though it's a strategy to make that difficult, and potentially in some ways it's a political decision. But our users and people we speak to find that very difficult to understand what they should be bringing to market, and gaining that understanding quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, Klaas, I'm curious to hear how this differs to the Netherlands. What technologies are you seeing really driving change over there?
Yeah, well, first of all, the planning and development process is very complex. There's a lot of different stakeholders involved to make it a success. And what we see in the Netherlands is mostly that it's a fragmented approach. So it's siloed. It's not one joint approach. It's also the technology which is supportive to the business. It's either finance or either urban planning, but not a combined effort. And that's the way we work in the Netherlands, but also the continental Europe. We see the same things there. What we see coming up, however, is also the rise of more intelligent software solutions, where the technology not helping making the decision, but also creating opportunities and helping to come up with creative ideas, etc. So it's becoming more and more intelligent, and that helps, but it's still a fragmented approach.
Yeah, and Matthew, what technologies do you see really driving change with your clients?
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a very good question. I think from our side, we're very much involved so we start off with the acquisition of data on the site. So that's hence why we've got a subsidiary survey business, and that is very important to us. Is the capturing the information, as-built information of the existing site, whether that's an existing structure or whether it's a piece of virgin land. And then we take that information and then obviously provides a feasibility study, which starts to bring in a platform called BIM, Building Information Modeling. And there's a number of BIM maturity levels in the AEC industry, and we're still kind of, for the last 10 years, going back and forth, BIM level 1, BIM level 2, BIM level 3. We kind of work still in BIM level 1, which is basically where, with the building we're designing or the asset, we're kind of putting the metadata into that model, which is everything down to the energy performance, the EPC information of the building, everything down to the cut sheets, manufacturer spec detail of everything that's specified within that proposal. And then, as Euan said, we're then putting it into PDFs, compiling it for planning authority review, LPA, all goes siloed that way. And then we start to open it back up again when it becomes sort of an asset management tool for the asset itself long term. So the kind of elephant in the room is the platform that LPAs use, that we're kind of going backwards and then having to take a huge leap forwards. So yeah, we've kind of got a few different methods that, from a technology basis, that we're quite keen to just really have the whole coordination of the team from every stakeholder, kind of involved really. So
yeah, and when we look at technology is usually implemented to solve a solution, and you've spoken there about data being in silos. But what do we all think are the most significant challenges that technology is aiming to help address within urban planning and development? What are the challenges that technology is really out there to solve?
I think one of the problems is that people from technology don't usually get kind of the planning world, and then planning people don't usually get the technology world, right? So it's quite hard. These are two very separate worlds. And in the words of kind of paraphrasing kind of Cedric Price, technology is the answer, but what is the question? And I think we're still grappling a little bit with that question. But when it comes down to it, kind of we do have some very big questions, some very big challenges, right? Not only that we need to build in this country 370,000 homes a year, globally we need to build 175 million a year. But it's not just building homes. It's what is the impact in terms of sustainability? What are the neighborhoods we're creating? What's the best location? What's the infrastructure? So we do have some really, really big, meaty problems that we have to address, and technology is perfectly placed to do that. The problem is that today we don't really make use of the technology, and the technology that we need isn't really necessarily things like AI, etc., but it's some very, very remedial stuff. It's fixing the data, fixing the plumbing, right? Because that data, if we kind of fix this remedial stuff, that creates the foundations for some really radical things to actually happen. But without that, we're kind of in a way kind of putting band-aids on some of these issues.
I mean, I think, Klaas, you mentioned siloing before. I mean, all of the major stakeholders are all essentially still very much siloed. Yeah. You've got, a developer, whatever size that might be, there is a community consultation element to that. But how has that typically happened or handled at the moment? It's through a letter campaign, probably from the council, letting people know that this is going to take place at a certain time. And digital platforms to assist with that aren't difficult to build and would be far more efficient and effective in undertaking that critical exercise. But also, how do we do that at an earlier stage so that the community is involved from the day of that concept design and the schematics of what we are going to propose on a particular site? But yeah, connecting all of those together shouldn't be a difficult thing. It's very simple, but it's slow.
And just building on Simon's point, like I think the development process is a collaborative one, right? So technology can give us that platform where we can actually kind of collaborate. So with Blocktype, what we do is kind of, we often describe it as Google Docs for site layouts, right? Somewhere where people can actually collaborate and draw and move buildings around and check the viability, check the impact it's having on parking, on sustainability metrics as well. So I think in a way, kind of technology can give that space where this stuff can actually happen, which today just happens behind closed doors in meetings and no one actually fully understands the impact of the decisions.
I think that's a very good point. I mean, the biggest thing that we find as well with that exact example is misinterpretation. We're submitting information, we're submitting proposals, and because we're putting it into one particular delivery method, the deliverables might say be 2D elevations, let's just say, interpretation of the scheme can be taken in so many different ways. Whereas obviously, if we are exploring a full technological exploiting that with every stakeholder, it allows the whole project to be open and interpreted exactly as we would be, exactly as as our rationale for the design. So I kind of see that as being a benefit for everyone, rather than, like I say, this closed door. Here's the scheme, take it or leave it, planning authority. Which I think kind of needs a bit of a change, really.
Now, that's also what we see in the Netherlands, and that's a little bit helped by the urgency now with the shortage of for dwelling residential property. There's really a willingness to act with all stakeholders involved, and we started now with the initiatives of speeding up tables where government, municipalities, commercial real estate developers, etc., come all together and be open on their approach towards this real estate development. For instance, if one sells the land for real estate development, then the land value is based on assumptions. If you share these assumptions and work together in one financial model to bring it all together to make it really happen, then the constraints, what to tackle, and this openness can be created by working in one platform. And well, technology can help there, but the willingness to act is also crucial to success. And that's really a step forward, because in the previous years it was a fragmented approach. So one came up with and stick to the land value. Others had constraints about the amount of social housing, etc. Now it's in a brainstorm session all stakeholders coming together and come out if they have a feasible plan. And that is really beneficial from this crisis.
Matthew, you mentioned before misinterpretation. Were you referring primarily to the planning authorities or a broader audience?
To be honest with you, Simon, it's a broader audience, because the way that we kind of compile, the way we go from concept to scheme design, there might be about 20 variations in an evolution of a design, for instance. And a lot of the rationale in every architectural decision has like I say, there's a reason behind it. And it's very easy for you've got sometimes developers, if we're working with developers, sometimes developers say, well, why have you put that there? Why is that there? Why does it look like that? And what we've done is we've adopted all of the planning rules, the 20, for instance, the window distances rule, rights to light, all of the key constraints that we have to take into consideration with every feasibility kind of comes into the way this thing looks and feels. And I think it's really important that that's kind of justified within the journey we've gone through. And I think that's kind of where I was saying, and it's even down to the client. We even have it with the client where they say, well, actually, we're a little bit confused why that looks like that, or is represented that way. And then we have to go and backtrack and show the kind of that kind of process. So it's that's kind of where I think something that can really kind of audit trail that would only be beneficial for everyone.
Like I think Matthew's absolutely right, because so much of planning development is about trade-offs, right? And we don't, and it's very hard to visualize or understand these trade-offs, right? Today it's very hard, right? You rely on a report to tell you what the viability is, and what difference does it make if you say change a unit mix in terms of viability, right? Or if you add another 2 stories in terms of the kind of some sustainability metrics, right? Now we manually do all these processes. So with Blocktype, for example, what we're really keen to do is actually start making those trade-offs very explicit. So, well, what happens if you add another 2 stories? What does that do to your community infrastructure levy contributions? It goes up, right? So maybe it's worth adding another couple of stories, because maybe you might be able to pay for a school that you wouldn't be able to pay for before. And I think these trade-offs at the minute in the planning world are so hidden, right? And all these decisions are kind of like hidden under kind of consultants and reports. And I think one thing that technology can do is make the process a lot more transparent and understandable. It's still going to be political, right? Because there's these political decisions that need to be made, but at least we'll be able to make the political decisions with a bit of confidence and understanding of what these trade-offs actually are.
Some very good points there. Euan or Simon, I can't remember who mentioned the housing, but it's a good topic that I think we should jump onto next. So the demand for housing is growing, but delivering homes quickly, affordably and sustainably remains a challenge. We've mentioned that in the UK, there's an ongoing housing shortage with an ambitious government goal to deliver 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years. And I'm sure, Klaas, you can share some insights into some.
We have the same challenge, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. To some similar goals in the Netherlands. But to achieve this, the government has introduced mandatory housing targets for local councils, aiming to streamline the planning process and accelerate housing delivery. Innovative approaches such as the build-to-rent model are also being promoted to scale up housing delivery quickly and efficiently. So, taking this into consideration, should we go around the table and really explore what the key barriers are to housing delivery? What are the problems getting in the way of achieving these goals?
Everything.
Look, like I think it's quite well understood. There is a number of barriers, right? There's not a single barrier. Everything from where are we going to get your bricks to is there enough kind of people to build the homes? But the first barrier is figuring out what can you build where, aka the planning world, right? It's really, really hard to actually figure out what you can build where, right? This is the art of development, finding a site and figuring out, actually, I think I can build 20 homes here. Can you? Or is it going to have to be 10? Or can you actually build 30, right? No one knows. Right? No one actually knows. This is incredible. Not even the planning department knows. They might have made some assumptions in some form of SCHLA document at some point 5-6 years ago based on old data, but no one knows. It's this really weird kind of process where everyone's kind of trying to second guess what you can actually build, right? And I think until we fix that, I think all these other tweaks the government are doing to the planning system, it will help, it will nudge the dial. But really, when we're talking about 370,000 homes a year, we're basically doubling the number of permissions we're going to need annually, right? So we have to double that. It needs to be something significant. And I think unless we start addressing the ambiguity and lack of certainty in the planning system, I don't think anything is going to really shift the dial significantly enough for us to be able to reach these numbers, right? We have to somehow find ways of writing planning policy that says what it means and means what it says, that people can understand, that there isn't any questions, well, what does this actually mean? So when a developer finds a piece of land, they can be relatively confident that that land is allocated for housing, and they can put 20, 30 homes, whatever that number is, because that also sets a value. So that's what deal starts dealing with the land speculation side of things, right? So I think in a way, planning kind of can fix a lot of the problems. It's not going to fix everything, but it can really fix a lot of the problems, particularly the affordability side.
I mean, you know, it's interesting as well. I mean, does there need to be greater agency at the community level? Do they need to be more involved with the policies that housing policies or planning policies that are applicable to their micro community in their area, maybe down on a postcode level? Do you have do you work with them to establish what is the design policies for a street or an area, and say, if you achieve X, Y, and Z, then you will succeed, or you do have planning consent? And is that sort of an expansion of permitted development rights to a degree, if that was achievable? Because at the moment, I mean, it goes into planning and it gets bogged down there for you know, a minor application, and a medium application is what, 8 and 16 weeks, but it's probably double that at the moment, due to, you know, all sites of various reasons. You know, we had COVID, then we had Brexit, and you know, the delays and concerns about the, you know, policy changes between the two groups, but then not enough planning officers. You know, that's just one side of it, isn't it? And then you've got, you know, 80% of SME developers falling out of the market in the last 30 odd years. You've got labour is just at a shortage, supply chains, cost of building going through the roof, the impact that materially has on existing use value, which then landowners don't necessarily accept, or simply won't accept because they can't. They can, but they won't. They want what they want. It's a massive challenge, and there's yeah, it's a massive challenge.
I do think we need to be careful though around blaming the public sector, because yes, planning departments are under resourced, but remember, the vast majority of money and time is spent before you submit a planning application, right? If we are to meet our current kind of targets, it's likely the development industry will spend about kind of £3 billion a year just to prepare planning applications, do all the feasibility studies, all the reports, etc., etc., etc. That's without actually, before you even submit the application, right? So I think there's a lot to be said around efficiencies and productivity in everything that happens before the planning application, but that also includes the rules and regulations that the public sector do have to create better rules and regulations. But I often don't think it's the development management officers in the local authorities that are like, we often tend to blame them, right? But yeah, really, I think there's a much bigger problem, which is what happens before you submit a planning application.
Yeah, I mean, well, there is. I mean, I think that the vast majority of costs would probably extend beyond and after the consent of an application. But yeah, how do we improve, you know, the relationship between community and landowners and developers? I mean, I think both have to compromise a little in what their expectations are, but also be more conducive to collaboration and working together. I think the average developer needs to do a far better job at what their proposals are and what they look like. You know, we still are building developments, or the vast majority, probably 80%, 90%, still look like the buildings that were designed and built, you know, 150 years ago. And I'm not sure what percentage of our developments are architect design, but I think it's probably lower than 10%. That needs to improve as well.
No, I agree. I mean, I think I think the key word Euan said is uncertainty. And I mean, when, you know, the typical dialogue when we get a new appointment is a client asks us, well, what's the chances of us getting planning consent? And we, as much as we gauge it on looking at all the opportunity constraints with every site, we can't actually say, yes, absolutely, you've got certainty in this project. We always say, quite crudely, planning is a lottery. However, we do look at, obviously, policy. We look at all of the whole sphere of everything that comes into a feasibility for a scheme, and obviously we try and work very closely. And I think it's not about the blame. I totally agree with that. It's not about the blame for the LPA. I think it's about trying to create good dialogue and having a very good cooperative, not a slam closed door, burn bridge type of approach. It's very much a cooperative, two-way kind of coordination with the LPA. I think that's always a success in trying to find opportunity. I mean, the other thing we've got, which is just in terms of a key barrier, is modern methods of construction. Now, we do about 80% of our work is modern methods of construction. That's timber frame technologies. Some of them are European procured, so some of them come across from Eastern European, for instance. They come across, they're very, very good to a quality assurance standard. They meet building regulations, and the energy performance is much better than the stock housing that you get with a UK developer. That is a key fact. But there is a stigma that the first thing that happens is the local community looks at the scheme and they say, oh, it's a house that's got a German style design. It looks very Germanic. We don't like it. We don't want it in our area. And that is a problem. And what we're doing is then it becomes a problem, because then we're limiting to not just the look and feel of the design, but also the long term. It starts to cause a problem with the long term, because actually what we're doing is we're introducing a procurement route that actually is far better in sustainability, in the asset life cycle, but it's very there's a very sort of quick assessment to discount it out and say, well, actually, no, we're not happy with this because it's a European style of building technology, and we're not willing to accept that here. So I think that's kind of from where we see it, the uncertainty and the key barriers.
There's also a huge opportunity, right? Just to kind of talk about MMC, because I think that's a huge opportunity there. Because we have to look at planning within the whole context of development, right? At some point, you need to build something. How do we build something efficiently, et cetera, et cetera? And I think MMC is a huge opportunity, because you can see a world where actually, let's say we do agree on a style. Maybe it's not a Germanic style of houses, and we agree on some pre-approved house types. Right, so that kind of happens anyway, right? Most property developers have got their own house types that they use they'll build the same thing, they'll maybe style it differently. But you can see where all of a sudden, if we start kind of linking the planning world, which is one end of the spectrum, to the construction world through things like MMC, well, saying actually, look, these types of houses, we like them, they work, they meet all the standards, et cetera, so we can then start thinking, well, okay, so at least we've eliminated some bits of uncertainty, because these are nationally adopted house types, for example.
Totally agree. Yeah. And that's just to add to that. That's the one thing is, so when we're doing MMC, so when we're appointing an MMC project, what we're doing is it kind of affects technology, believe it or not, because what we're doing is we're front loading a lot of that information. So rather than the traditional RIBA stages of work where you go from concept to scheme to technical, what you're doing is you're actually completely front loading the design with all the technical information up front, so that the cost is controlled, that the procurement's uncertain, you've got the trades, you've got the supply chain in place. And all of that is so important, because that's what our clients want. They want to know that they've got certainty throughout the whole process, that they're not going to suddenly get a variation halfway through the project that's then going to bankrupt them. And that is something that at the moment, no disrespect to the local authority, but they don't want to really, that's not really their concern. But it is a big, from a full collaborative approach to this, it is something that is very important. And I agree, Euan, that's a good point.
Because if we can get to that, right, then, for example, platforms like Blocktype and others, so we provide these house types, so you can actually, with the house, the floor plan, with all the data, right? How much does it cost to build? How much water does it consume? What's the carbon footprint? And you can use these as the building blocks to plan our new towns, which we're then used today, or whatever other kind of developments you can do, right? So you can basically compress this whole kind of front load the whole planning process. So you're making decisions now that are going to have a positive impact when you actually start building things, right? So I think this is the opportunity of technology, right? But we have to really kind of I think it involves a big cultural change, particularly with local authorities.
And Klaas, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What would you say are some of the most effective ways that technology can help address housing quality, affordability, sustainability?
Yeah, I think there's the biggest problem in creating with high speed new dwellings, residential property is the political and bureaucratic complexity. That's the main topic that we should address. And I think from a technical point of view, a sustainable point of view, there's a lot of new insights and knowledge with the companies involved to solve that. But the one thing that we cannot solve from an industry alone is the let's say the faster permit processes. In the Netherlands, we have processes up to 10 to 15 years with a total change of assumptions during this period. So it was feasible at the front, but now it's halfway. It's not feasible anymore. This process that should be within max 2 or 3 years. And I think that the industry and all people involved, stakeholders, should focus on how to create, to simplify and digitalize the approval procedures, limiting unnecessary objections, etc., and reducing this delay. That's the thing that we cannot tackle from an industry ourselves. We need all people, political, etc., involved to speed up on this. And I think that is, at least from a continental Europe perspective, in the Netherlands, that's the biggest concern, and that's that's high on the agenda for quite some times now. But still no solution there, and hopefully, and I think technology can help to create insights and to help shortage on resources to do the work. But that is really the main concern.
Do you really see this planning process evolving to support this demand for housing, or do you envision the same issues in the future?
Yeah, well, to some extent, the technology is more and more intelligent, so it helps to understand the impact on residential or urban development from a regulatory perspective, but also zoning, etc. So it helps you to make, I think, a better and a quicker decision. But we are not there yet, and no. We need to take some major steps to really speed up the processes.
I think Matthew made a good point before. I mean, MMC's been around for a long time, and the benefits.
Sorry to interrupt, but what is MMC? Because that's the
modern methods of construction. That acronym that encompasses essentially all sorts of different types of, in essence, what we're talking about is just prefabricated modules and the capacity to build like Lego and to remove that on-site aspect as much as possible. But yeah, it's been around for so long, and the benefits of it are irrefutable. But until there is complete buy-in by those that are pulling the strings and determining policy, and it's going to be hamstrung. We're not going to get to where we want to. So we can have all the technology in the world, but until it is there that, right, we need to really change and do something about it, there's going to be a certain element of spinning wheels with, I think, macro changes and where we could possibly get to.
I think one topic that we have touched on, but we should dig down into a bit more detail, is this whole topic of data. So, as we all know, good planning relies on good data. But in a sector where information often exists in silos, accessing and using the right data at the right time can be a major hurdle. Whether it's understanding land availability, tracking infrastructure needs, or improving public engagement, technology is starting to change the way we collect, share, and apply data in planning. So before we talk about the technologies, what would we say are the key challenges that we have when it comes down to accessing and using data within planning and development?
I would say it's willingness to share data. It's sometimes it's considered as the gold of the unique selling point of commercial real estate developers, sitting on the data, having the data. If you know where new property can be developed, then there you create the value. So it's somewhat closely related to the existence of your company. But yeah, in order to speed up the shortage of housing, I think the main concern is to share data, to be open with the data that we all have.
An old colleague used to say that talking to planners about data is like talking to fish about water, right? Basically, they don't realize how much data they're processing because they're all these PDF reports, right? But these PDF reports are full of really, really useful information. In England, we process 450,000 planning applications a year. Every planning application has got drawings, it's got feasibility reports, it's got all sorts of kind of impact assessments, loads of really, really good data, but we don't value it. We bake it into PDFs and stick it into some portal that no one actually kind of can access or find, right? Badly named, badly completely unstandardized. So I think there's a real kind of missed opportunity here around being able to kind of gather all this stuff and start thinking about, well, what is the value that all this information has? Every single planning application's got loads of really useful data. Imagine we could aggregate that on a national scale, right? There's some really good changes happening, though. For example, government recently have the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which has a whole chapter on planning data, right? Which gives government the power to set standards around planning data, gives local authorities the power to request standing data. So I think there are some early signs of change, but I do think there's just if you ask planners about data, they're going to say, "What do you mean?"
Yeah, I agree with that. I think from our sort of practical side, one thing that's a clear challenge for us is as I mentioned quite earlier in the call, is the difference between the as-built data and the kind of open source data. For instance, Ordnance Survey data never seems to align well. So that's the geospatial data, never seems to align well with the actual measured site data, as a crude example. So we get a site measured, and then we have to determine the ownership boundary with a red line, which then is always disputed by the owner by saying, "Oh, actually, no, my fences are now is a meter over that way more because I measured it," and the neighbours kicks off. No, and it is very much so disconnected. So when we then try to align some of the proposal information, as in the data, our BIM information, all of our site layout plans, and we then compress that down on top of the Ordnance Survey data, it never aligns. And then, but the local authority are kind of depending on a location plan from a licensed Ordnance Survey map. So there's always this grey area between the accurate sort of as-built information versus Ordnance Survey data that's kind of good enough. And then that information is then fed through to things like title plans, land registry, and then that becomes disconnected from planning. So we're getting planning on a site we don't really know the real size of, and who owns what, and what's the buffer period in the middle, and it can start going into a legal sphere where we're not lawyers, but obviously we're trying to do the best we can with the understanding of what the client owns and what essentially is the site boundary. So that's kind of just an example of, where we have problems that could be potentially changed, and maybe it's more of a geospatial mapping based, maybe a sort of consortium in the UK that needs to sort of look at that. But I know it's something that is a constant issue.
When you're talking about the as-built of mapped on site, Matthew, you're referring to existing buildings at that time, are you? And how they've been? Because I would have thought that the OS overlay map has taken that very data, and that is what feeds their overlay, their master map.
From my understanding, I have sort of gone into geospatial sort of consortiums and understood it from, like, Ordnance Survey. I mean, it's highly respected, it is credible, but the difference is that I believe now, like, I'm not entirely sure about this, but I believe it is taken from a satellite-based overlay. So, for instance, they see, let's just say you've got a new outbuilding in your garden, and it's not quite on the Ordnance Survey map, but let's say in a year's time it is. But it's what it is. It's captured from maybe an aerial photograph, and then it's just traced over with a line, and that's enough to kind of make out that yes, you've got some form of a structure there. The problem is that can be taken as legacy, and the client says, well, actually, no, that block is showing that it's 10 meters by 6 meters when actually it's 12 meters by 10 meters, and it causes all of this problem. And then the LPA is sort of in the middle of it. The site layout is never quite as it should be when we've had a topographic survey done on the site, for instance, where we've actually had a surveyor work with a GPS total station. He's getting pretty accurate information. That doesn't align with all the survey. So that's something that is just a little bit of an issue we find with when it comes to compliance and just generally the legal side of land ownership. On your point, Simon, about existing buildings, if let's say it's a building in the middle of London and it's a 5-story building, that tends to be okay because we can then go to the archive or we can get it laser scanned, and that never seems to be an issue. It's mainly if you've got site parcels that you're looking at putting four units on. That's when it tends to be an issue.
And I guess remember, Ordnance Survey is probably one of our best data sets available, right? Like, if you were to imagine trying and find planning application data, right? How many homes have been approved in the last year? No one knows. We barely know how many, but what's the tallest building that was approved this year? No one knows. We don't know. We don't collect that data. The data that we collect is really, really poorly collected. It's interesting to see even just how local authorities currently work out the completions data, right? So what buildings have been built, how many homes did they deliver that year, right? Some local authorities get on a bus, all the planners get on a bus and they try and count it. Right, they literally go to on site and try and figure out, is there curtains there?
I don't believe that. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely true, 100% true. And I'm not going to name the local authority that told me this, but it's incredibly
Why do they need more than one person to do that? It's like, do they go through 1, 2, 3?
Task.
Yeah.
Well, they all have to count them, and then they work out what they came up with, and they just take a blended average.
It's like in an age of like AI, large language models, generative design, you think, what really is that what we're doing there, right? And remember, that's a really important data set. How many homes have we built last year? And the truth is, we don't know. We're kind of guessing. We're going around sites and trying to count them. Essentially, I mean, government buy data from some of these data brokers on this because they don't have the data, right? And the other data brokers estimate it using kind of different proprietary data. It's a really, really broken system.
And what role would you say that data standards have to play in improving this consistency and transparency of the data?
Well, I think there's two things. One, let's collect the data properly, right? So at least we have it, because I think with planning, the bar is so low. But then absolutely, I think we need to standardize it. We need to standardize it nationally. For example, look at conservation areas across the country, right? Or tree protection orders across the country. You would have thought that we'd have a standard around that, but we don't. Every local authority collects them in their own kind of weird and wonderful way.
Most of them don't. I mean, TPOs is just
TPOs are terrible. Yeah.
Absolute nightmare. I mean, most of them don't do it. Most of them are on a PDF. Most of them don't even have an address. There's no geospatial. It's like throwing mud at a wall to determine what's there.
So Simon, you guys must have to deal with, you're probably on the coalface of this, right? Trying to collect local authority data and you probably have your own standards. I'd be really interested to know your experience in that.
TPOs makes my hair stand on end because it's a critical element. You need to know what's there. I mean, from a feasibility perspective, it's almost your number one question. And that's the question that we get asked probably more. Well, it's up in the top 3 or 4. Have you got TPOs on that you can render on a map? And at the moment we say, well, we've got around about 40,000 TPOs and around about 38,000 tree preservation zones. But we're working on that. And they'll be like, oh, X has them. And I'm like, yeah, they might have them, but they have no accuracy whatsoever. And they're like,
or it'll probably be in like microfiche or something like that, right?
Yeah, like you might see an image and it says there's a TPO and it's in the middle of a gable roof, and it's like, that's the problem right there. It is just poorly done, and most of them don't do it. So it's a monumental task. But standardizing the data and de-siloing it is got to be the first step.
And is it then something that has to come from the industry itself or from the government?
Government, I think. I think industry is saying we need it, and we will be far more efficient if we have access to these tools. And it is happening. It's, there are far more data sets now that are available and coming out that are under the the government's, I think, version 3 open source license. You know, and the first thing, which is fantastic, that it says in that license is exploit this data.
Yeah. Like, I think this is the most valuable thing government can be doing, right? Fixing data, fixing plumbing, so that startups like all of ours can, and technology companies can actually use it, right? Because then the impact of actually fixing this data and making it open, right? The economic impact is going to be huge, right?
Yeah.
Because the issue is that there's some parts in government that think, wait a minute, we can monetize this, right? Let's think maybe land registry or others, right? We think actually we should be charging for this data because it's our data. And of course, you do have to pay to upkeep data, etc. But understanding the economic impact of this, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill sets a requirement that basically all planning data should be open, which is going to be really interesting to see how that kind of evolves and over time.
Yeah. It should be open. I mean, how can it not benefit others and everyone else collectively to be able to access that? I mean, you know, as you mentioned before, Euan, you know, there's so much data in there. Yes, it's a huge cost to capture that and then to standardize its record and the record keeping around that. But yeah, I mean, we'd be all in a different place if we had access to that immediately.
And just look into the future before we wrap up this discussion. What do you think the future of the planning system will look like in the next decade, and how will technology really shape this evolution?
Don't know if that's one for me.
I'd like to say, I mean, we're building a platform to help plan for housing, right? I mean, I would say that, of course, because I'm we've created this thing, but it's showing incredible efficiencies, right? We're basically getting local authorities doing their own feasibility studies for all of the sites in the local plan. That hasn't happened so far. They just apply density numbers, right? So basically, local authorities in creating a regulation are having a much better understanding of impact. So I think if we imagine this, for example, we've got one local authority up in the north that basically is assessing about 4 times more sites than they used to for about 20% of the cost, right? They're estimating a 4-fold increase in number of affordable homes because of this. Now multiply that by 340 and you see the potential impact of one single platform, right? I think the great thing here is that we do have quite a vibrant, a lot of kind of very, very passionate people trying to fix this. What we have to be careful though is we have to make sure that all our different platforms can speak to each other. We work with kind of standardized data. We can exchange data, right? We don't want to get in the world that the planning system ended up in the 90s around kind of monopolies, or a lot of the rest of the technology world is, right? How can we let a million flowers bloom in the world of technology and planning?
Thanks. And Klaas, how do you see the future?
Yeah, nothing to add to what's already said before. Yeah, but maybe a more intelligent software that helps. I think that the AI is really speeding up and providing solutions which we a year ago could never dreamed of. So that's definitely going to help. But yeah, we are at the beginning, and it's only really going to be a success if there is enough data to build upon. So that's it starts with the data, and then we can really achieve way more if we use the technology which is available.
Thanks. And Matthew and Simon, have you got any more comments to add on?
Do you want to go first, Simon, or shall I?
You can, because I'll just regurgitate what you say, because I'm not sure.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I mean, from our side, I did hear someone, I don't know how true this is, but someone told me that in Singapore, for instance, they have a tool where you can upload a BIM model, which is, like I say, our kind of go-to platform for design now. And that provides a live validation in terms of being able to assess the appropriateness and the feasibility of a scheme. And I mean, this was some time ago, someone told me this idea, and I said, this is kind of what we need. We need more of a, you know, a kind of a platform where you can upload, you know, your kind of metadata into, you know, a similar platform that is then talking on exactly the same maturity level in terms of, you know, especially in our world, architectural and geospatial information. And then it's potentially validated, maybe in real time. Who knows? Maybe there's an algorithm in there that assesses that actually your window's too close to that, whatever that building there, saving the local authority a huge amount of time, cost, etc. So I think from our side, I think there's some extremely good, hopefully some great opportunity for improvements, which would essentially make everyone's lives better. I think that's, and to move away from this Great example of baked down PDF kind of out of date portals that, you know, they've been fine for the last 20 years, but it's time for change now.
Yeah, I think more collaboration, just on a very simple level, will assist from the early stages of concept. You know, whatever that is that RIBA 1. You know, in bringing more people forward and together into that process and better understanding maybe what a landowner's, you know, mission is initially, and how to better capture that from not necessarily a time, cost and quality perspective, but more of a four capitals approach, which is more around the sustainability and community, human capital and produced capital. But which from there you can gain a better understanding of mission and core values and value outcomes. But I think from the planning point of view, you know, the average person, you know, and the consultation with community is such a critical element to it, and of course it has to be, but the average person can't read a plan and they don't understand the proposal in elevations or floor plans or sections, whatever they might be. So you're going to struggle immediately. So I think the you know, the advent of, you know, you've got the digital twin, but then you've got gaming environments where cities have been recreated to, you know, tolerance of 10 or 15 mil, and you can then drop a proposal into that, and you can interact with that proposal within the city and the streetscape and understand what that will look like and the impacts on that on the immediate surroundings. I think that's incredibly powerful for the community and the average person who doesn't spend their time looking at drawings. I mean, you know, I haven't looked at a drawing for quite some time, and I look at it immediately, and it will take me a little bit of time to understand what I'm looking at. So, you know, good luck to someone that is just, I don't know, not in the industry. It's hard. You just don't understand. We need to improve that.
No, some very good points there. So this discussion's highlighted how much technology is reshaping planning and development, whether it's through streamlining processes or tackling challenges like housing delivery and data access. It's clear that innovation isn't just about new tools, it's about how we integrate them into existing systems and collaborate across sectors, and also ensure that they deliver real value. At RICS, we see firsthand how our members, spanning across the entire property lifecycle, are adapting and are driving to these changes. And as technology continues to evolve, so must the way that we plan, build and manage our built environments. So a huge thank you to our panelists today for sharing their insights, and for all of you for listening to the conversation. I hope that this has sparked new ideas and perspectives, and I look forward to seeing how technology continues to shape the future of this space. But for today, thank you, everyone, and I look forward to chatting about this in the future.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Thanks, Klaas, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.